Hello and welcome to Aero Innovations. I'm Aero and I'll be your host this evening. If you're new to the channel, I'm a longtime pro who specializes in the low stakes. So if you're looking to crush low stakes, no limit hold'em, then you've come to the right place. Normally I play 2-5 at the Win Encore in Las Vegas where I buy in for $1,500, which is 300 big blinds. But for this episode, to continue my new 1-3 series, I'll be playing 1-3 and buying in for 500, which is the max. So before starting this 1-3 session, I played for 3.5 hours at the 2-5, lost just over $500, but wasn't able to capture any exciting footage for a vlog. The action was pretty dead though, down to one short-handed table. So I head over to the 1-3 to hopefully make some good content. It's Saturday morning on September 20th. I start the session at 5 in the morning. 4 minutes into the session, under the gun limps. I put in a little pot sweetener to $10 with King 10 of diamonds in the cutoff. The button and blinds fold, but the under the gun limper calls. The flop comes 6, 4, king, rainbow with 1 diamond. We flop top pair with a mediocre kicker and a backdoor flush draw. Under the gun checks. This is an above average flop for our particular hand holding. We definitely want to bet here, but on this rainbow, somewhat dry board, we don't want to go all girls gone wild. I mean, our kicker is nothing to write home about. We want to go for value, but we don't want to own ourselves in case we're outkicked or simply just beat. So I start with a very reasonable c-bet of another stale $10. Our opponent makes the call. The turn brings in a 5 of hearts, putting 2 hearts on board. 7-8 makes the nuts. I'm not a real big fan of this card. It completes various 2-pair combinations as well as some straights. 4-5, 5-6, and 7-8 all have us in a really bad spot. Still, when our opponent checks for a second time, I want to try to get some value out of a naked 6 or a weak king, like King 9 suited for instance. So I increase the aggression with a bet of 25 into the $44 pot. Suddenly, our opponent puts in a distasteful check raise to an even $100. I mean, he could be doing this with a backdoor flush draw and a pair as a semi-bluff, but that's a really advanced technique. And it's also some pretty big wishful thinking, putting our opponent on the absolute worst hand he could have here that we still have beat. I mean, even though I'm a big optimist, when you're playing poker, you need to be a realist. So I just make the easy fold and move on. 20 minutes later, the cutoff opens for 15. The small blind calls. I defend my big blind with ace-3 of diamonds, which is pretty reasonable. If it had been offsuit, this would just be a clear fold. In fact, if I were actually holding all the way up to ace-10 offsuit, it would still be a fold. You never want to call a hefty 5x raise with a dominated hand out of position. So the flop comes king, king, deuce with a heart and 2 diamonds. We flop the nut flush draw on a paired board. This is not the most ideal flop, but it's not absolutely terrible either. Small blind checks. On paired boards, there's a decent chance neither of our opponents has anything. I don't want to check here and have the cutoff bet with 100% of his range, so I decide to take the lead with a bet of 20, which is a slightly under half pot size bet. On boards where there's a really good chance that neither of your opponents has anything, it's a good idea to simply fire out a small bet and try to take the pot down with your draw. My ploy works as both opponents quickly fold, and I win this pot without needing to improve. 10 minutes later, the middle position opens to 8, which is a much smaller than normal amount. The button calls. I defend my small blind with ace-10 offsuit and the big blind folds. We go 3 ways to a flop of 9, deuce, 10, rainbow. We flop top pair with top kicker, which is pretty ideal for our hand holding. Since I'm out of position and first to act, I decide to check here to see how my opponents would like to proceed. The middle position throws out a very weak c-bet of 10 into the pot of 24. The button, potentially sensing this same weakness that I'm sensing, raises the action up to 25, which is still only a pot-sized bet. I could just call here, but I might end up losing more money in the long run if I have to end up calling a turn and a river bet, only to find out I'm drawing to 3 outs or less if I'm up against 2 pairs or better. I'm not sure if the button actually has a massive hand, or if he's only raising since the middle position let out with such a weak c-bet. I decide to find out right here and now and put in a check raise to 50. Surprisingly, this provokes the middle position original raiser to jam all in with a massive shove for about 300, and the button snap calls. Yeah, this is just an easy fold. I found out what I was looking for. So the action completes, but things get pretty insane when the middle position flips over Jack King of Hearts. Jack freaking King. He shoved with a gut shot even after facing a raise and a check raise. That's just mind-blowing. Is there any chance I could have folded the best hand here? Heh, of course not. The button snap called for a $300 shove after all. he turns over the actual winning hand, revealing pocket tens for top set. Pocket freaking tens. No matter how I played this hand, I was bound to lose a decent chunk. The important thing is I folded once I garnered the information I was looking for. Here there's a live 6. I open with a small pot building raise to 15 in the +1 with pocket 7s. The low jack calls. The hijack suddenly throws out an unsavory 3-bet to 65 with a stack of over 1,000. Surprisingly, the small blind and big blind both cold call. That's like absolutely shocking. What kinds of hands call a $65 3-bet with the original raiser, me, still left to act? Especially when they're out of position, no less. I mean, what if I had pocket kings or aces here? I would 4-bet huge, and they just each weigh $65 and never even get to see a flop. Anyways, with all of this action, I have the right odds to set mine, considering I'm always topping my stack back up to 500, so I'm priced in to make the call as well. The flop comes 10, deuce, deuce, with 2 hearts and a diamond. We do not in fact hit a set. What's worse is after the small blind checks, the big blind, an OMC looking gentleman, fires out a considerable bet of 95 into the pot of 266. 95 into a pot of 266 may not seem like a very big bet, but when most of us are only sitting here 500 deep or less, that's a pretty large chunk of our stack. I can never call here, especially when I still have the original 3-better behind me, so this is just a clear fold. 45 minutes later, the hijack opens to 15. The cutoff and button both call. Looking down at pocket jacks in the small blind, I definitely need to bump this up. If we were deeper, I would raise this up pretty considerably. My position is bad, and I need to fade quite a few high cards on the flop. However, since most players here are only 300 to 500 deep, I 3-bet this action up to 65. I've been criticized that my 3-bets are kind of weak when I have big pairs in the blinds. Keep in mind that betting and raising structures are different for every casino, usually depending upon location. Las Vegas does not play the same as Southern California, nor does it play the same as Texas. You need to learn the betting structure for your specific casino and play accordingly. For my 3-bet to 65, which some players might think is a bit too low of a price tag, everyone simply folds. The very next hand, there's a live 6. The cutoff, my opponent from earlier with the top set of 10s, opens to 30. That's a 5x raise and conveys a lot of strength. If I didn't have position to him here on the button, I would just fold this ace-jack offsuit. But since I do, I make a tentative call and everyone else folds. The flop comes 10, ace, 8, rainbow. We flop top pair with a decent kicker. The cutoff throws out a continuation bet of 35, which is actually a very good sizing. This does not convey either strength nor weakness. It's an over half pot size bet on a rainbow board in a heads up situation. Of course, I'm not going anywhere, so I make the call. The turn brings in a beautiful ace of spades, pairing the top card. This greatly reduces the odds that our opponent is holding the last ace. Still, when our opponent fires out another bet of 50, there's no reason for me to do anything here other than to simply call. I'm basically only holding a bluff catcher. If he has ace queen or ace king, he has me completely dominated. The board is still rainbow, so if he doesn't have me beat, he most likely has a gut shot at best. I have position on him, so I want him to keep blasting if he's behind, and I can always put in a river bet if he checks. So the river comes and it brings in a wonderful 10 of spades, double pairing the board. Now we no longer have to worry about a bigger ace. It is extremely unlikely for our opponent to have fired all of this way with an ace that's weaker than what we're holding, so this 10 is a very welcome sight. Either we just got lucky for a chop, or we were ahead the entire way anyways, and this 10 doesn't hurt us. Sadly, our opponent gives up on the river and puts in a check. I think he realizes he can't continue firing on this sort of run out. I reach for chips, but he just folds. 10 minutes later, I open to 10 in the middle position with ace-jack offsuit. The button and small blind both call, when the big blind suddenly shoves for his entire stack of 145. This is the gentleman I incorrectly categorized earlier as an OMC. He's currently on like his 4th buy-in or something, and has been shoving a ton pre-flop. Ace-jack is normally an easy fold against an OMC's shove, but this particular gentleman has proven himself to be anything other than an OMC. I think I'm ahead of a lot of his range, so I put in a pretty quick snap call and everyone else folds. The flop comes 4, 9, deuce with 2 clubs. The turn brings in a queen of clubs. My opponent excitedly turns over his hand to reveal ace 10 of clubs for the turn nut flush, so I'm drawing completely dead. The river brings in an inconsequential 7 of diamonds, so we lose this one, but at least we made the right assessment pre-flop when we stuck our money in. Never let a bad run out get to you. As long as you're getting your money in good, be proud that you're making good decisions. 15 minutes later, under the gun limps. I raise to 11 in the middle position with ace deuce of clubs. It's just a little pot sweetener with a speculative hand, kind of like raising with a small pocket pair. The low jack, high jack, small blind, and under the gun all call. We go 5-handed to an absolutely gorgeous flop of queen, deuce, deuce, rainbow. We flop trip deuces with an ace kicker. It doesn't get a whole lot better than this. Small blind checks, but the under the gun player leads for a bet of 20 into the pot of 58. This is just perfect. There are no draws of any kind. I smooth call and everyone else folds. My opponent is the same guy who fired 2 bullets earlier when I rivered the full house with ace jack on that ace ace 10-10 board. The turn brings in a jack of clubs, keeping the board deliciously rainbow. Under the gun steps up the aggression with a bet of 60 into the pot of 98. Beautiful. Since the flop was so disconnected, I find there no reason to raise here. Most likely, he's holding a queen of some sort and is drawing to 2 outs. He's shown he's the sort to keep firing as long as I don't show any resistance, so once again, I only just smooth call. The river brings in a jack of diamonds, which is not my favorite card. I'm no longer at the top of range. I now lose to any hand that contains a jack, like jack queen, and chop with any deuce. But when my opponent fires out another weak bet of only 60 into the now bloated pot of 218 with less than 200 remaining, I don't think I have to worry about him holding a jack. He would have just simply gone all in on the river, considering his stack depth. I figure it's about time to get the rest of his chips. You don't need the nuts to go for value. Try to get value whenever you can find it, as long as you've pieced together that you most likely still have the best hand. So I shove all in for the remainder of his stack. But unfortunately, my opponent makes a pretty quick fold. He was most likely just firing with air the entire time. Maybe now you guys will understand why I check raised with ace 10 earlier on that 10 high flop, even after facing a bet and a raise. This guy doesn't always necessarily have anything. Hey, what's up guys? Aero here, Aero Innovations Poker. Just thought I'd hop on, tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about the channel. First off, yes, I realize I'm wearing a really silly jester's mask. But if you want to judge me for it, maybe I'm not the only fool. Anyways, I've been playing poker professionally for over 18 years now. I started the channel back in June of last year. I put up some of my stats up on the screen. So last year I made over 150 bucks an hour. This year, not doing so well. I'm only making about 85 an hour. I had a really rough, I think it was January and April. I had some losing months there. This is all while playing 2-5, by the way. I can normally be found at the Win Encore in Las Vegas, where I buy in for 1,500, which is 300 big blinds. And yes, that's a pretty deep stack game. On the weekends, sometimes I can also be found playing on the Absolute Nuts live stream. I play there about once or twice a month. Recently on the channel, I've also been showcasing 1-3 vlogs. I've started doing 1-3 to try to get a bigger audience for the channel. So my goal for the channel is to teach you guys how to become better low-stakes poker players, whether that comes from playing better hand ranges, making the proper bet sizing, or learning how to analyze what your opponent could be holding. Sometimes you gotta fold a monster, and other times you gotta call with bottom pair if your opponent's line doesn't make sense. Okay, let's address some frequently asked questions. Why do I always play so late? Why am I always playing between midnight to 6 in the morning? Well, primarily it's to avoid the OMC crowd, like, you know, really tight players that play between like 8 in the morning to 5 p.m. Trying to avoid those people at all costs. There's more action in the middle of the night. There's also generally less pros. Most of the pros are usually trying to play during prime time, maybe like 7, 8 p.m. to about midnight or so. That's when I come in after everyone's tired. They're coming home. They're coming out of the clubs. They're drunk. The drunks come rolling in. Also, people are stuck. They're tired after work. A lot of people come to play poker after work. They don't get there, you know, until 6, and then they play. And by midnight, they're exhausted. They're tired. They're sleepy. And you want to take advantage of that. I also do a lot of game selection. Like if my table is bad, I switched to another table. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm trying to make as much money as possible. I'm not really trying to butt heads with other professionals. I can do that on the live stream game. I don't need to do that on a regular basis. Second frequently asked question, why the silly mask? Why do I wear this mask all the time? Well, my wife suffers from social anxiety, so she really values our privacy and anonymity, and I really value my wife. So if I ever want a chance to visit her in the breeding pits, I gotta put up with the mask. Yes, I literally just said breeding pits. I make a lot of inappropriate jokes here on the channel. I like to use a lot of self-deprecation, how I talk about my really small pee-pee. I make a lot of Asian stereotypes. If you guys enjoy Chris Rock, that's kind of the humor that I also do. Last question, do I play online, and are there any sites that I recommend? Yes, I do play online occasionally. There are actually a couple of clubs that I endorse. I don't want to mention anything right here because I'm trying to avoid the YouTube strike hammer. But if you check out some of my older videos, like, go through my videos, you can see some of the online videos that I've uploaded. I also have some live streams I've done, and it'll showcase the two clubs that I advocate for. I actually give away $500 a month if you play in one of the clubs that I play in and you join using one of my affiliate links. Anyways, I hope you guys are enjoying the video. I'd really appreciate it if you like, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram. And I'll see you guys soon. 10 minutes later, the hijack limps. As typical for small pocket pairs when I'm deep and I have position, I put out a small pot sweetener to $10 with pocket sixes on the button. The small blind folds, but the big blind and hijack both call. The flop comes 9, 3, 5 with 2 hearts. Both players check to me. I can't beat a 9, but this is why position is so important. Neither player necessarily has a 9 here. I throw out a considerable bet of 20 into the pot of 31 to charge for the flush draws as well as weaker pairs like something with a 5 or a 3. If I face a check raise here, this will just be an easy fold. Instead, the big blind calls, but the hijack folds. The turn brings in an inconsequential deuce of diamonds. My opponent checks again. 4-6 does make a straight, but I'm holding 2 of those 6s. Plus I just tripled my odds to beat a 9 in the rare event that my opponent is actually holding one, since I just picked up a gut shot to go along with my 6s. I don't think this is the case though. I throw out another bet of 30, continuing to charge the flush draw and weaker pairs. Again, my opponent only just calls. The river brings in a 7 of diamonds. My opponent checks for a third time. The flush draw misses, but now we lose to a hand like 5-7 or a flush draw that contains a 7. I mean, I'm pretty damn greedy, but I'm not about to bet third pair for value here, so I just check the action back. My opponent turns over Queen 5 offsuit to reveal one of the very specific hands we were targeting, so we win this pretty decent pot. I gained an additional $50 in value, not afraid to bet without holding top pair. Every tiny edge increases your hourly win rate. Don't miss out on value just because you're too afraid to bet with anything other than the nuts. Try to get a feel for what sorts of hands your opponents could be holding, and how much you can get out of them with a slightly better hand. The very next hand, an opponent I've battled a few times over at the 2-5, moves over to our table here at the 1-3, and brings over a stack of about 400. He opens for 12 in the hijack. I look down at pocket 9s in the cutoff. A $12 raise is a pretty decent raise. It's not necessarily weak for the 1-3. I'm on the fence here between 3-betting and just calling. But since I know that my opponent is a 2-5 player, he's more likely to raise with lots of hands that I currently have beat, so I decide to play this one aggressively and put in a strong 3-bet to 40. The small blind cold calls, and the low jack comes along as well. The flop comes 10, queen, 9 with 2 diamonds. We flop bottom set on an incredibly connected board with a possible diamond flush draw. Jack King makes the nuts. But when both opponents check to me, I'm not about to miss out on value just because I'm afraid of monsters under the bed. I throw out a continuation bet of 60 into the pot of 123, which is a decent sized bet without revealing the strength of my hand. Small blind quickly folds, but the low jack surprisingly ships it all in for his entire stack of 360. I snap call faster than snap crackle pop. I didn't even think about it for half a second. This was just completely reflexive for me. What sort of hand overshoves all in? If you watch my vlog regularly, take a moment to think about it. Jack King would usually not do this. Sure, there's a possibility that my opponent could have pocket 10s, but if that's the case, I'm not about to fold for a few $100. I'm just gonna pay the man. Plus, if our opponent really does have Jack King, we still have outs. More than likely, however, The type of hand that shoves massive on this type of board is one that wants to utilize fold equity. More often than not, it's going to be a draw of some sort, and potentially even a combo draw. So the turn comes, and it's the mystical 9 of clubs. We improve to freaking quads. Quadzilla. Oh, how I've missed you, my reptilian friend. It's been months since we've had a Quadzilla sighting, although considering I took most of the summer off, this was to be expected. The river brings in an inconsequential 7 of clubs. I introduce our opponent to Quadzilla, and he turns over Ace Jack of diamonds for the missed combo draw we knew he was most likely holding. It's always fun to destroy a 2-5 player his very first hand. 20 minutes later, the middle position and hijack both limp. I look down at Ace 9 offsuit on the button, which is a pretty garbage hand. Fair warning, I'm about to spend a lot of time discussing this hand, and it's not even going to be a very significant hand. So if you're not here for my long-winded explanations, then just use the chapter slider below to move on to the next hand. This hand is a snap fold in any other position, but I want to give you guys an example of how different hands play in different positions. In this hand, since there are other limpers in front of me, my hand range expands almost infinitely on the button. I'll play all sorts of garbage in position, but keep in mind it's only because I have experience in how to play them post-flop. I don't recommend playing bad hands even on the button until you familiarize yourself with the strengths and weaknesses of different positions. For instance, with this exact same hand, if the action had folded to me, I would open raise to $10 against the blinds. If I were in the low jack or high jack, I wouldn't even call for $3, even if there were a couple limpers in front of me, because I would still have to worry about the cutoff and button calling behind me. I know, this all seems really complicated, right? Let me explain it this way. First off, this is a really bad hand, so if I'm gonna play it, I want to be the last to act every time. I need to see how others respond to an ace-high flop, for instance, before the action gets to me. It's very possible for 1-3 players to limp ace-10 and even higher. I don't want to get involved in a hand where I could be dominated down to 3 outs. Okay, so then if there are no limpers, why would I raise against the blinds? It's very simple. The blinds are dealt 2 random cards that they don't even necessarily want to play. Ace-9 beats their range a good majority of the time. On top of that, I will have position and can potentially steal a lot of pots that I don't necessarily even hit, like a deuce-deuce 4 flop, for instance. Simply put, position increases the strength of your hand, but it still does not give you the green light to bloat up pots with mediocre hands multi-way. So anyways, I put in the call on the button. The small blind folds, and the big blind checks. The flop comes 7, 9, queen, with 2 clubs and a diamond. We flop middle pair with an ace kicker, but when the action checks to me, since I will only ever play this garbage hand on the button, I've gained the information that most of my opponents have pretty weak hands or draws at best. It's time to put that theory to the test. I don't want to put in a pot-sized bet here because I'm not at the top of range. Any queen has me drawing pretty badly. Think of bet sizing as putting out bait. I don't want to attract the attention of the most vicious predators that my fishing pole, or in this case my cards, can't handle reeling in. I only want to hook in the weaker pairs and draws. If I get check raised, I'll know that my hand is no good and I can easily just let it go. I'm targeting hands like 8-10, 10-jack, the flush draw, a 7, or a 9. So I throw out a positional bet of $5 into the $13 pot. All 3 of my opponents call. The turn brings in a gorgeous ace of diamonds, putting 2 diamonds on board to go along with the 2 clubs. We've just been upgraded to 2 pairs, otherwise known as aces up. This ace now actually does in fact put us at the top of range. We are only losing to a set and ace queen, none of which would have played it this way so far. This is how you range your opponents. Since the flop was wet and dynamic, a hand like pocket 7s would have either let out or check raised at this point, especially considering how small my flop bet was. So we can rule out such a hand. Ace queen would have raised pre-flop the vast majority of the time. Notice this sort of thinking only applies to the majority of instances. You can never be 100% sure of anything, especially in the ultra-low stakes like the 1-3. People at these stakes do all sorts of strange things, so you can't put anything past them. However, when you play poker as a professional, you can only work with statistical percentages. You can never be completely sure of how another person will play. I once saw a player fold the stone cold nuts after he flopped the nut straight and got check raised. He was worried that his opponent could have a set and was worried about getting drawn out on, even though he was a 66% statistical favorite in that made-up scenario he conjured up in his head. As it turns out, his opponent actually misread his hand and thought he flopped the bottom end of the straight, which even if he did have, he'd be drawing completely dead. People in the 1-2 and 1-3 do some really weird stuff, but in the grand scheme of things, these are known as outliers. We don't worry about them. We want to eat the main portion of the pie, not worry about the crust or the crumbles. If we win playing a certain way 8 or 9 out of 10 times, don't worry about the 1 or 2 times that some whack job beats you with a hand that he shouldn't have been playing, or beats you playing a certain way that most people wouldn't have. That's how inexperienced players go on tilt. Instead, congratulate those players when they win. Tell them, nice hand. Those are the sorts of players you want on your table. So anyways, here with ace-9, we should have the best hand an overwhelming amount of the time. So when the action checks to us once more, we want to go for max value. What do you do when you most likely have the best hand in a multi-way pot? You want to get as much money into the pot as possible. So this time, instead of throwing out another feeler bet, I target the largest of the fish in the pond with a full pot size bet of 30 into the pot of 33. I'm targeting all of the draws, all of the 2 pairs. I really don't give a hoot. If someone check raises me here, it's time to pile the money in. Come on, beluga whales. Come on, Moby Dick. Come get me. For this price, the big blind calls, but the other 2 players fold. The river brings in a jack of hearts. 10 king makes the nuts, and 8-10 also makes a straight. But that aside, we beat every other realistic hand. We even beat jack queen. Unless our opponent was very specifically holding a hand like 8-10 of clubs or diamonds, we should be good here most of the time. So when our opponent checks here for a 3rd time, we know that, on the turn, he most likely had a draw of some sort. We are no longer at the top of range because we do lose to the 8-10 combo draw, and any missed draw won't call us for a dime. So now we want to target very specific hands with our bet sizing. Hands like the ace-high club draw, a queen from a very sticky player, or a hand like 10-jack that just hit a jack on the river. Other than the ace-high club draw, those other hands won't call a very big bet here. So unlike our turn bet, we want to price this river bet a bit on the smaller side. I shoot out a bet of 40 into the pot of 93. Unfortunately, our opponent puts in the fold, so he most likely completely missed a draw of some sort. This hand may seem insignificant due to the pot size compared to my very last hand, for instance, so then why did I spend so much time going over it? I wanted to emphasize some very key elements in this hand. First, I wanted to talk about position, and how the very exact same hand should be folded in certain positions, called in others, and even raised on the button. Secondly, I wanted to talk about an extremely common problem that most players have, including my coaching students. Can you guess what it is? Take a moment to think about it. It's bet sizing. How much I bet on that flop in this hand, on the turn, and on the river were very meticulously calculated. It was all done deliberately. None of it was by accident or randomly selected. You guys need to drill this lesson into your heads. If there's one hand that I want you guys to go over in this video, it's probably this one. Every single bet I made in this hand targeted specific hands that I wanted to call and tried to maximize profit whenever I thought I had the advantage. A lot of times, I'll ask my coaching students why they chose a particular bet size, and they won't have an answer for me. Try to make sure that every bet size you choose, you're doing it deliberately and with a very specific result in mind. Hey guys, super quick emergency broadcast. So I normally don't release my videos on Mondays, but there's going to be a $10,000 free roll tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and I wanted to get the information out to you guys as soon as possible so that you have enough time to enroll. I'll leave all of the information in the details below in the video, or you can check it out in my comments as well. I'll leave a comment and provide you the link on how you guys can get access. And it's totally free, no purchase necessary, and I hope you guys take home some free cash. 30 minutes later, I looked down at the gorgeous red pocket nines again. They only just flopped a set and turned quads less than an hour ago. So here I open to 12 under the gun. The low jack calls when suddenly the hijack goes all in for about $100. Everyone else folds around to me. I mean, there are a whole lot of hands I'm ahead of in this spot, especially against a short stack shove. Hands like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, smaller pocket pairs, etc. So this is just a snap call for me. You guys saw earlier how a gentleman shoved with ace-10 of clubs for 145, for instance. So unless I'm up against the tightest of tight OMCs, This is just a call 7 days a week. The low jack gets out of the way, so we go heads up to a flop of deuce 7-9 with 2 spades. Holy moly! We just flopped another set of 9s. Can you believe it? Sometimes I can go for an entire week without seeing a set, but today, 9s are hot. The turn brings in an ace of hearts, and the river brings in the queen of clubs. Our opponent flips over pocket kings. Pocket freaking kings, the accursed hand, so we scoop this one. Less than 10 minutes later, the middle position, my opponent from the last hand, opens for 16 with a stack of about 270. She had to rebuy because some jerk just cracked her pocket kings only a few moments ago. The low jack calls, and I call in the cutoff with ace-6 of hearts. Any suited ace is decent enough to call a 5x raise in position, especially multi-way. Everyone else folds, so we go 3 ways to flop of ace-4-5 with 2 clubs and a spade. We flop top pair with a backdoor straight draw. The middle position leads with a very strong c-bet of 30 into the pot of 52. The low jack folds. I almost consider folding right here and now. It's very unlikely that our opponent is betting with air here considering the bet sizing. Yes, we did flop top pair, but we're completely crushed against her opening range of hands, which will include a lot of ace-king and ace-queen. However, I didn't call with ace-6 suited to fold to a single bet after flopping an ace, and I think there are a lot of turn cards that can improve our hand, so I decide to call once and see what transpires on the turn. Let's change the scenario and say more people had called pre-flop, and instead of a $30 bet, we faced a $60 bet or something similar, for instance. In that case, this would just be a clear fold, because our opponent would not have enough money remaining in her stack to win. A bet of 30 with a starting stack of 270, however, leaves me with enough wiggle room to justify this call. I'm referring to implied odds. So the turn comes, and it brings in a lovely 3 of hearts. Any deuce makes a straight. We improve to an open-ended draw with our 6, so if our opponent had a bigger ace, our odds of catching up just shot up dramatically from only 3 outs to a staggering 11 outs. 8 outs for the straight and 3 more outs for a 6. Our opponent shows her fear when she suddenly down bets to 25. She must be worried about the possibility I could be holding a deuce here. I plan to capitalize on that fear. If I just call here, my hand will be pretty face up. She'll know I either have a weaker ace or a flush draw. I don't want to just shove though because she might think I'm trying to steal the pot, which, against a bigger ace, will be exactly what we're going to try to do. But I want to try to be a little bit sneakier about it. I put in a milky raise to 85, making it seem like I very much want a call. At this point, I'm almost positive we're behind. Yes, we're getting great odds to simply call here for 25 to win this pot of over $100, especially with our 11 outs to win. But that's not how I like to play. I always want to utilize fold equity whenever possible. This 3 on the turn here is about as good as it gets, other than just outright hitting a 6 for the gin card. And since it is admittedly Halloween month, I want to try to scare my opponent into letting me have all of the candy in the middle. Come on, lady, just fold. Just give it up. I'm a whack job 1-3 player who's holding some weird combination of a deuce here. But after nearly a minute in the tank, my opponent, unfortunately, comes to the right decision and shoves for the remainder of her stack of about 225. I'm committed, so I have no choice but to call. I'd be putting in another 145 to win a pot of 562, which is just under 25% of the pot. With roughly 11 outs to improve, I'd have exactly 25% equity. So this is a break-even call here if we assume that we're beat 100% of the time with a bigger ace. However, that might not always be the case. Our opponent could have several hands here that increase our odds even further, such as ace-3, ace-4, 4-5 suited, or even just a naked flush draw. Heck, I've even seen some players shove with pocket kings on ace-high boards due to frustration. So factoring all of that in, we just put in the snap call. So the river comes, and it's a very welcome 7 of clubs. The front door flush does come in, but we improve to a straight. Even though it was my opponent who technically went all in, I just table my hand first, because we already know what sort of hand she most likely is holding, and I just sucked out on her twice in barely over 10 minutes, stacking her for a second time. Here I look down at pocket 9s for the 3rd time this session and open to 12 under the gun. The low jack button, small blind, and big blind all call. So we go 5-handed to flop a 4, 10, 9 with 2 hearts and a club. What in the world? Holy smokes! Did we seriously just smack yet another set of 9s? For the 3rd time tonight? 3 out of 3? Man, I wish I got 9s more often than I get kings. Small blind and big blind both check. Okay, so the action is on us in this 5-way pot on a super wet, incredibly dynamic board. There's the obvious flush draw, but also various straight draw combinations as well, such as 7-8, 8-jack, and jack-queen. We are at the very tippy top of our range here, so we can skip out on the information gathering stage. Instead, I want to go for max value. We have no fear of being raised here. In fact, we would welcome it. I lead for an incredibly strong bet of 50 into the $60 pot. The low jack calls, the button folds, the small blind calls, and the big blind folds. Reduced down to 3 players, we go to a turn, which brings in the queen of diamonds. There are actually very few turn cards which will be completely safe. There's the very obvious flush draw, but also any card between a 6 and a king can potentially bring in a straight. But I like this queen more than most other straight completing cards because jack-8 is an unlikely hand combination for a $12 raise, compared to 7-8 suited or jack-queen for instance. So when the small blind checks, I need to lead for another strong bet here. Sure, I do lose to jack-8 and jack-king, but then again, I was already losing to pocket 10s on the flop anyways. You can't always be afraid of the nuts. So I fire out for 150 into the pot of 210. The low jack calls, but the small blind folds. The river brings in an inconsequential deuce of spades. Nothing changes. Our opponent only has like 150 or something like that behind. He's not calling for $1 with a missed flush draw, but maybe he has a hand like jack-queen. Maybe he puts us on the flush draw and he's holding a 10. Who can really say? The pot is pretty humongous, so I just shove all in for the remainder of his stack. My opponent quickly puts in the call, and after I table my hand, I'm shocked when he reveals pocket 4s for a smaller flop set. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. There's no reason why he shouldn't have just gone all in on the turn. Heck, with his hand, he should have just raised the flop to be honest. But like I always say, 1-3 players do some really weird stuff. Still, I can't believe pocket 9s flopped a 3rd set for me tonight. About 15 minutes later, the low jack and button both limp. I look over at the button stack and notice he only has about $60. Staring down at my favorite hand of the evening, the all-star MVP known as pocket 9s, I raise the action up heavily to $26. This is a much larger than normal raise for such a mediocre hand in this position. However, I have a very specific purpose in mind with this raise amount. If the big blind or low jack call this raise, there's a very good chance the button will just shove all in, which will allow me to reopen the betting round with a 4-bet to isolate and go heads up with a whole bunch of trapped money. Unfortunately, the action folds around to the button, who still ends up going all in anyways, due to the raise amount being nearly half of his stack. So of course, I'm happy to make the call. I turn over my hand, and my opponent turns over his to reveal ace-8 of spades. The flop comes 7, 6, jack, rainbow. The turn brings in a 4 of hearts, but when the river comes, you won't believe this. Of all the cards in the deck, take a moment to guess what the river brings. I'll give you a second to think about it. So the river comes, and it's a freaking 9 of clubs. Mind blown. Absolute overkill. For the 4th time tonight, we make a set with pocket 9s, one of which upgraded to quads. Okay, I better get out of here before the table murders me. In for 800 and out for 2088 for an incredible profit of $1,288 after 4 hours and 2 minutes of playtime. Okay, so this session started off a bit rough. I was stuck for about 250 an hour in, but slowly climbed out of the hole and finished off absolutely amazing. If you think I only win because I run good, keep in mind I lost over $500 at the 2-5, and I was also stuck here for the first 2 hours of this 1-3 session as well. So that's 5.5 hours of being stuck before things finally turned around. Later this night, after getting some much needed sleep, I ended up playing on the Absolute Nuts livestream and cashed out my biggest session ever on their stream. I won just shy of $9,400 playing their 5-5 no limit game. But you guys will have to wait until the next vlog for the highlights. To summarize this month, I played for 33 hours, and won just shy of $17,000. Definitely an above average month. As you can see, I'm not playing nearly as many hours as I used to, because I'm trying to keep up my dedication to pump out at least one video a week for you guys. So if you like this video, please show your appreciation by clicking that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Instagram to qualify for my monthly $100 cash giveaway. Check out my Patreon for early releases to my blog, as well as to see the continuation of the coaching series. And as always, I hope to see you in the next video.